welcome to the diner where we serve up culture from a short order kitchen. Step up to the counter and let us serve you a slice of mental pie. Not a feast, just a snack, a deep thought to chew on from a big, meaty book. It'll go good with a cup of coffee, and then you can get back to the fray with a few beautiful new thoughts to think. It's season 2, and the Blue Plate Special is still Timothy Petitsis' The Ethics of Beauty, that daunting doorstopper of popular theology that turns out to be amazingly accessible and powerfully relevant. This time we're talking about his essay on sex and gender, Only Priests Can Marry, the reconciliation of men and women in Christ. Roll up to the counter and have a couple bites of it with us.
Welcome back to the diner. Today we're going to take some time to just kind of review some of the things that we've been talking about in our most recent episodes. We were talking about ecstasy and ecstasy. We were talking about chiasm, and we were talking about the cruciform gender callings, all of which are related to one another, as well as to many other things. So let's start with chiasm and talk about that a little bit. So remember, we were talking about chiasm and explaining how it encompasses the cruciform shape of reality, where you have two seemingly opposite things coming together and like switching places and symbolizing one another. I was just explaining this concept to my kids the other day, and I was using the example that is in the book where Petitsis he saw the icon of the crucifixion and the icon of the resurrection. And at the foot of the cross, at the crucifixion, there was the Theotokos and St. John. And then in the resurrection icon, on the one hand, you have Adam, and on the other side, you have Eve. And the way that these icons were situated in the particular church that he was in, you had Eve and the Theotokos opposite each other, and you had St. John and Adam opposite each other, so that if you were to draw a line from one to the other, it would make an X shape. And so that was the point that he was making, is that these things kind of cross one another and, like I said, come to represent one another. And we see this, we talked about seeing this in our gender roles, where women are called to be prophets first, and men are called to be kings first, and both of them are called to be that way in a priestly manner. But women, by fulfilling their prophetic gender calling, eventually come to represent the kingly role. And likewise, men, by fulfilling that kingly gender calling and being the one man lost, as he likes to say, they end up becoming prophetic in their unknowing of others and in their relationships.
Well, I have a question for you, Lisa. Why is it more important to use the concept of chiasm and chiastic structure than intersection? Like, our culture might be more familiar with the word intersection right now. So what's special about chiastic structure?
Right. So the chiasm, like if you're just talking about intersection and where the things meet, you're not going beyond to where they become transformed and transfigured. So it's like it's falling short. It's stopping short of how far they're really able to go and meant to go.
It's almost like chiasm is almost best understood iconographically as male and female. Like that seems to be the best metaphor that we have for chiasm outside of like the psalmic structure and everything. So it's almost like you can't understand chiastic structure without referring to gender and sexuality and what that's supposed to mean. The only other icon that we really have for that is in its name itself, the cross, is where the horizontal beam crosses the vertical beam. Well, and I guess that's where we get into the ecstasy chiasm too, because ecstasy in this context would be the horizontal dimension of spirituality, the going forth from the self, out of the sphere of the self, into community with others. So an ecstatic spiritual experience is not self-contained. It becomes part of others and everything else, and unifies in that way. Whereas ecstasy, instead of going out from the self, goes deep within the self. It's the vertical dimension of the self. Now, if it was only an intersection, then there would be a separation of the two. We would have the introvert versus the extrovert. I'm going to go be social and go outside of myself, or I'm going to go be introspective and go deep within myself. But we're talking about something much further than that. We're talking about how ecstasy, the deepening of the self, actually enables our ecstasy, and vice versa. And so the greater depth you have in your spirituality, in your personality, in your personhood, the deeper your ecstasy, the further reach of your ecstasy. And conversely, the more ecstatic you are in a healthy way should enable you to reach deeper levels of ecstasy. Because, and I would guess, I would surmise that this has to do with like mirroring, like the more we come to know others, the more we can understand ourselves, not just with our own narratives, right? Like if this is when people talk about the dangers of introspection, which I think is nuts. um like how else are you supposed to grow a personality unless you figure out who you are in the first place, where you're starting from, right? But this is what they're talking about. The dangers of introspection is that you're only listening to your own narrative. So in order to truly practice introspection, and then introspection would be the psychological term, ecstasy would be the spiritual term. We need the reflection of others so that we don't become like an isolated monad, and basically commit the sin of pride. So this is an example of the chiasm, ecstasy and ecstasy, and it is inextricably tied then to our understanding of cruciform gender calling, right? Because you can make an analogy then that we're both priests, right? In Bautista's analogy, both male and female are priests. The prophetic function reaches deep within the self in order to find the connective unity to preach out to the world, the prophecy. It takes from within and brings forth without. The kingship establishes the order from without that needs to be internalized. So kingship then is the ecstatic function in this analogy, and prophecy is the enstatic function. And in order for each one to work, they need each other fully. They need to be transformed by the full and healthy experience of each other.
Right. When we talk about the cross, like if we keep that image in front of us, I think that's really helpful, because it's not, like we said, it's not just an intersection where they cross each other without touching, but it's you can think of it as like going through one another. The end static going through the ecstatic experience, and thereby being transformed to something more than what it was before that. I don't know, before that meeting, before that coming together.
Well, another visual is the icons themselves, the icon of the crucifixion, the icons of the resurrection, both of which show heaven meeting earth. I mean, right? It's the intersection of heaven and earth, but they're not just touching, they're penetrating one
Yes,
another.
yes, and they're being transformed by one another. That where when heaven touches earth, earth is no longer what it was.
Right, the gates of hell are thrown open. When heaven comes to interpenetrate it, it is transformed. And I guess the converse of that would be what Christ being enthroned, right? Earth goes to ascend into heaven, the ascension.
Yes. So now mankind is sitting on the throne of heaven. So they are affecting one another by their interaction, by their coming together?
I think one of the things that people get frustrated with this spiritual understanding of gender and sexuality is they kind of go, well, so what? I'm a woman, I'm a man, the opposite sex bewilders me completely. Like, what is this spiritual stuff? How's that going to help me with my marriage, with my relationship with my kids of the opposite sex? Like all that stuff. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah. So let's see. We're at 13 minutes.
Let's come back again next week and talk about practicality. Okay.
So there's your recap. We'll come back next week with some more practical boots on the ground type ideas.
Thanks for joining us at the diner. If this season resonates with you, you may be interested to know that over the summer, I released the sex ed curriculum I created for my own teenagers. Sex Ed for Sane People is a high school level discourse on human sexuality that, among many things, is informed by the understanding explained here in Ethics of Beauty. It's interactive, meant to be customized by you for your students, and it's available for download on my website, lauraewolf.com.